listening to the Astral Hour. I'm your host, AstralMeadow. Join me as we take a glimpse into the mysterious. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm joined once again with my husband, Justin. I have been wanting to do a deep dive episode on the astral plane for a while. And as I was starting to lay it all out, I decided it would be cool to make this a two-part series. For part one, we'll be going into the human constitution, the 7 bodies, and some of the various aspects and functions of these different bodies. And then for part two, we're going to go on to explore the astral plane in detail, its scenery and its inhabitants and things that one might find or be able to do in that plane. So, for this first part, we will mostly be referring to Arthur E. Powell's books, The Astral Body and Other Astral Phenomena, The Mental Body, and The Etheric Double, The Health Aura. All of these books can be found online or are part of the public domain because they're over 100 years old. So feel free to download the PDFs and kind of follow along with this train of thought that I've been on. So quickly, I'll go into Arthur E. Powell. He was a Welsh theosophist whose books were published beginning in the early 1900s. He studied the major esoteric works of Helena Blavatsky, Charles Webster Leadbetter, and Annie Besant. His books are a corroboration of their many theosophical works. So what he has done is during his studies, he has compiled from all of these different theosophical writers books around certain topics, which has been very helpful to me because it is like, it's kind of all over the place. I mean, some people don't have the time to read everything, but maybe they have an interest like me in just looking into the etheric double. And that's where this kind of started. And then it's very helpful to have a manual that really focuses on the etheric double. And as I was reading it, it's, bringing up these other books, which he corroborated. And then I'm like, maybe I do want to go ahead and get that book now. Right. But it helped me focus on what I was seeking in that moment. And then also was kind of a really nice guide point on how to extend my knowledge. And then I decided to go into this whole, human constitution thing, which very much plays into my studies of homeopathy. So, yeah. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Thank you.
Justin is here to provide feedback and help expand on some of my abstract ideas and ground all of this information for us.
Yeah, I'm always happy to be on the show. I haven't read the books the way that you have, but I have helped you study. And so I do think that I'll be able to provide a little bit of my own opinion and insight here and there where it's needed. So, but I am excited about this episode. I think the topic's really fascinating. I've enjoyed learning about it as well.
Yes, and you've definitely followed along with my studies for the past few years. So
that's true. Yeah, we've done a lot of talking about these kinds of topics.
Yes. And you just have this gift of, here I am, I'm like overcomplicating something. I've just spent all this time, and then you're like, oh, here's this very simplified way of viewing this complex subject you've spent all this time on.
Yeah, we're a good team that way, I think. You provide all sorts of great information, and then I'm able to help cycle it through and ground it and bring it back all together.
Yeah, you got that mercurial thing going with him being your chart roller, so...
It does help that way.
Yeah, it works out for all of us. All right. So students of occultism are likely familiar with the fact that we all possess several different bodies or different vehicles of consciousness. These different bodies enable us to express ourselves on the various different planes of nature. Today we are going to go into these 7 different bodies. And I would like to begin by lightly covering the significance of 7, something that we can keep in mind when we're exploring the occult or esoteric literature. I'm going to read a quote from Leoline L. Wright, and this was an article I read prepping for this episode, and I really loved it, so you can find it online. It's from The Seven Principles of Man, an Ancient Basis for a New Psychology. So she writes, 7 is one of the most important numbers in the teachings of Theosophy, the wisdom religion. It is a key by which are revealed and explained many of the mysteries of nature. For in Theosophy, it is taught that numbers underline all the processes of creation. This numerical key of 7 lies at the root of all evolution, whether physical or spiritual. It is therefore important, both in its meaning and application. So as we, study ourselves as humans, we start noticing these cycles of 7. And, you have like the first 7 years are the developmental years, and then 7 to 14, we're exploring certain themes, and then 14 to 21. And then it's like these cycles of 7 become very important as we evolve, and, develop our personality and integrate our higher faculties and things like that. And it seems like these waves of 7 become really important. There's also, 7 layers of the skin, 7 colors of the rainbow, 7 notes on the musical scale. And so, 7 is a really important number when we're looking at the evolution of life, right?
Is 7 the number of years it takes for your body to regenerate and like your cells change into completely new cells?
It's either 7 or 10, but 10 is also an important number. But 7 does sound right for that.
It's somewhere right in there, and I could be wrong, but right. As you were talking, that's what it made me think of.
Yeah, so we're basically every 7 years a whole new being, our physical body anyways.
Right.
So let's now look into our sepentary constitution. So the 7 bodies are, and as we go through this episode, we'll try to stay in order, but similar to the Hermetic principles or the Kabbalion episode, it's hard not to talk about all of it because it is actually all interpenetrating and working as one unit.
Right. So
dividing it helps us understand it and make more sense of it. However, I don't want you to lose sight as I go through these as viewing them as separate entities, because this is all a part of you and your human constitution and how you connect in, with your higher spiritual self. And so it's important to view it as one as well.
Right.
So, all right. So the first one we'll explore is the physical body. Second is the etheric body. Third, the astral body. 4, the lower mental body. 5, the causal body or higher mental vehicle. 6, the buddhic body. And 7, the atmic body. And then we'll lightly go into the monad. In different types of philosophies, sometimes they might combine the lower and higher mental as one, and then the monad would be 7. But for this particular episode, I'm going to focus on it this way because I just think it's easier to integrate, and we can still kind of talk about the monad or, the cosmic spark as we go. That'll be kind of how we tie it all together at the end, is how I'm seeing it.
Okay. That sounds good.
So these 7 are split 2 ways. We have the higher triad, which is made up of the Atman, Buddhi, and Manas. Manas is associated with the higher mind. And these upper 3, this triad is immortal. So these aspects of us do not die, and they carry on lifetime after lifetime. And that's important to think about. And then we have the lower quaternary, which is made up of Kama, Prana, the Linga Sharira, and the Stula Sharira. And we'll go into the bodies that each of these principles relate to. But these are the mortal parts of ourselves that die and have to be recreated with each incarnation. So the lower 4 work together to form the vehicle in which the ego, overshadowed and guided by the Atman Buddhi, re-embodies itself on earth, also known as reincarnates. So we'll definitely talk about the causal body later, which is the part of us that holds the memory of our other incarnations, and the part of us that we access when we're in like the Akashic records or meditating with our higher self, right? So that's the aspect of us that holds the memory of all of our lives. And so it gets fun as we explore the higher planes.
Yeah, that's pretty neat to be able to go back and to access all of those things.
Yeah. So the part contains everything that the whole contains. So I want everyone to keep the Hermetic principle that we have went over in the Kybalion episode of as above, so below, as below, so above. Everything that's going on in these higher planes absolutely is affecting us in this lower plane, and we are also having an effect on the higher plane. So we don't want to feel like these little, unimportant beings because, we affect the whole.
Right.
And so what we do and the actions that we take and the choices that we make, it's very important in the evolution of the all, right?
Yeah. Ultimately, we're all connected.
Mm-hmm.
And I was listening to something the other day, and it was referencing the fact that outside of the physical plane, there is no time. And so our incarnations are happening simultaneously, which is, kind of hard to wrap your mind around. But you can, that's, I guess, one of the reasons that you can absolutely affect what we would consider past or future versions of you. And you can send energy and you can change things and help them. And as you learn here, they learn there simultaneously because it's all happening at the same time.
Right.
Which is pretty deep, but pretty cool too.
Right. And when we're holding these physical bodies, we're actually holding like a lot of, dimensions at once.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so these beings that are just, of the higher spheres, like they don't have the same opportunities. They've already done the work and evolved out of it. But we have a lot of things that we can do when we have a physical body that we can't do when we're just, in the ethers and the spiritual realms. And so having a physical body is kind of a gift, and we can really view it as, how can I work with my physical vessel to bring forth what my soul is wanting to bring into the world, right? And so it's not just some, oh, I'm sick, like, oh, this stupid vessel, like, oh, now I'm like lusting or got the greed. We have things to overcome. Right, which we'll talk about. I'll try not to jump ahead too much. But anyways, let's start with the physical body. Okay, so remember the 7 I brought up?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 7 different bodies. Well, within the 7 are a sub 7.
Oh, of course there is.
So
as above, so below.
Right. So physical matter exists in 7 orders of density. 1 atomic, 2 subatomic, 3 superetheric, 4 etheric, 5 gaseous, 6 liquid, and 7 solid. Particles of all of these grades enter into the composition of the physical vehicle with 2 well-marked divisions. 1, the dense body is composed of solids, liquids, and gases. That makes pretty good sense, right?
Right.
2, the etheric body or double consists of 4 finer grades of physical matter, which is the etheric, superetheric, subatomic, and atomic, which we'll get into more when we talk about the etheric body. I just wanted you to keep in mind that it is somewhat connected to physical matter and the fact that it is interacting with our physical body.
Right.
Okay. So the physical body is also referred to the sthula sharira, which can be translated to gross body. Gross being more like dense, not like ew. And if you've studied the koshas, these can correspond to the koshas. Some of them are merged into like one kosha. So I will refer to the koshas as I go. So for the physical body, we have the Annamaya kosha, which is known as the food sheath, aka the dense physical body. The The physical body is itself a mini cosmos. The part contains everything that the whole contains. It is a condensed elemental vehicle. This vehicle allows us to encounter physical nature. So it's kind of cool because you have a physical body and, obviously you're affecting yourself. But when you're in this physical body, you're also able to impact and inspire and affect the other physical beings, right? And so the physical body is necessary because this is how we, connect with others, develop relationships, attract other people into our lives. And it's an important vehicle. It's just as important as the other vehicles. Mm-hmm. So we are trying to have, discipline and care for the body and love the body, but we don't want to hate our humanness so much that we develop this weird relationship with our bodies.
Right.
Which I think I've seen, a little bit in some of these communities of people that they just want to go home, they just want to ascend, they just want to evolve. And I get that. Being a human is hard sometimes.
Well, sure. We got a lot of things to deal with while we're here in the physical plane.
Right. But without these hardships and without, these lessons that we can only learn in the physical body, we can't evolve our souls in the way that we need. And so these physical incarnations are really important to our soul's development.
Right. With that, in mind, you have to remember that we're choosing to do this. We as a soul want to be here and experience, because it does push our evolution down the path and helps us grow and expand. We want to do this. We know it'll be hard, but that's what helps us grow. That's what helps us push forward.
Right. So the key is loving the body, caring for it. There's these yoga practices really help get the body into shape, right? Because if we're weak, we can't really make a lot of actions, right? Because we're just so wanting to rest and sleep all the time. So what we eat, how we exercise, the amount of sunlight we're getting, and just loving ourselves, telling ourselves that we're beautiful and just being really kind to the body is so important and helps us maintain our health.
Right. That's why we shouldn't refer to it as our gross body.
Right. We'll just call it the Sula Sharira instead.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
All right. So we have a pretty good understanding of what the physical body is. So I won't get stuck there. But it is important to keep in mind that as we move through these bodies, like I said, they're all interpenetrating, and the one that follows is absolutely connected to the previous one in a very deep, intimate way. So we're going to move on now to the etheric body, which is what animates the physical body and gives it its vitality. So the etheric body is how we move prana. Going back to the koshas, it's referred to the pranamaya kosha, the vitality sheath. So this is the body that I've been studying, 30 classes in now into my homeopathy studies. Because how do these remedies work? Well, they work because they're working on this etheric body. And because the etheric body is so interconnected with the physical body that when we support it, it can manifest and also support us on that physical plane. So yeah, the vital force, or prana, the life essence, is the force that animates all life. It's the connecting link. So not only is it connected to the physical, but it connects the astral body to the physical body. A severance would result in physical death. So
interesting.
Yeah, without the vital force, you are dead, right? The only difference between a living and a dead body is the vital force, because the body's still there. We still have the organs, we have the blood, the heart.
It's in the physical. We just have the physical vessel.
But we need the life force to animate the body and connect us to all of the other aspects of ourselves, right? So it's very, very important. So the etheric body, or double, forms a psychoelectrical field around us, and it permeates the linga sharir or astral body and the physical body from birth to death with ever renewing currents of vital magnetic energies. So we are constantly bringing in more vitality. And I'm going to read from this book a little quote that I really liked. So this is the Etheric Double, the Health Aura book. Briefly, we shall find that the etheric double, while necessary to the life of the physical body, is not, properly speaking, a separate vehicle of consciousness. That it receives and distributes the vital force which emanates from the sun and is thus intimately connected with the physical health. That it possesses certain chakrams or force centers of its own, each with its distinct function. So this is the body that holds the energy field. It is how we get prana to enter the field. So how can we bring vital force in? We can go sit in the sunlight and absorb it in through our skin. We can do breath work, right? And that will bring prana in.
Right.
Also, the foods that we eat hold life energy. And so this is another way that we can revitalize ourselves, right? So like bringing in new vital energy.
That's why I guess it's important to eat fresh foods and healthy foods, because it still has the good, healthy, vital life force inside it.
Right. Absolutely. So here's the two main functions that it goes into in the book. The etheric double has two main functions. Firstly, it absorbs prana or vitality and distributes this to the whole physical body, as we shall see in detail. Secondly, it acts as an intermediary or bridge between the dense physical body and the astral body, transmitting the consciousness of physical sense contacts through the etheric brain to the astral body, and also transmitting consciousness from the astral and the higher levels down into the physical brain and nervous system. It also goes into those four things we were talking about earlier when we were talking about the physical body. So the ether is associated with the medium or ordinary current, electricity, and of sound. The super ether is the medium of light. The subatomic is the medium of the finer forms of electricity, and the atomic is the medium for the transmission of thought from brain to brain. This kind of goes into how the etheric body is connecting and kind of acting as like this bridge between the body, the physical body, and the astral body.
So would it be what is being affected with the practice of magnetism, using magnets to help heal the body or move things around?
Absolutely. And if you continue to read this book, there's a whole chapter on magnetism of objects and then also mesmerism.
Okay.
So, yeah. And I am totally convinced that this is absolutely what we're working with homeopathy.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. It makes perfect sense.
Also, like when doing Reiki, I think that it's working on this.
Right.
So in esoteric philosophy, prana transcends being just the individual life force. So it is the life force, but we can look at it from this deeper perspective. And it's our link to the cosmic forces. It allows us to draw in broader energies from the cosmos and establish a connection to source. All right, so it's like, once that guy breathe in that good ass prana, baby.
Right.
That's not your video.
Ralph Smart. It's hard not to like him and follow along. He's all the time telling you to do that.
Right. So, I'll go into this because this is something, as I was studying, that was really confusing to me. And why I decided to say, okay, I'm going to separate the etheric double from the astral body, because it makes it a lot easier to understand. But there are points in the literature where some people are merging the two. But it makes so much more sense to me to split it, because I do feel like the etheric body is going to be sort of the intermediary. And, the astral body continues to survive for a while after death. And that's like the physical body dies, the etheric body disintegrates, and then we still have the astral body. So I think it is important to view them sort of separately, even though they're absolutely interacting with each other.
Right.
Which we'll get more into when we look into what the astral body does. So I was going to read this little quote from A.E. Powell where he kind of clears up this confusion of the blending of the etheric and astral bodies. The etheric double has been given a variety of names. In early theosophical literature, it was often called the astral body, the astral man, or the linga sharira. In all later writings, however, none of these terms are ever applied to the etheric double, as they belong properly to the body composed of astral matter, the body of Kama of the Hindus. In reading the secret doctrine, therefore, in the other books of older literature, the student must be on his guard not to confuse the two quite distinct bodies known today as the etheric double and the astral body. So just note, depending on which culture you're looking at this through, they might merge some of these together.
Okay. Now, I had a thought. Does the etheric body, does it have anything to do with your aura?
Absolutely. There's a sort of auric field around each of these bodies.
Okay.
So the etheric body projects about 1/4 of an inch beyond the skin. The etheric aura, however, or health aura, as it is frequently called, projects normally several inches beyond the skin. And so each of these vehicles have their own field.
Okay.
And so I have this sort of diagram I can show you, and you can kind of see how as we go up, the fields sort of increase.
Mm-hmm.
And as you do spiritual development, like some of these other fields can get quite large. I was reading somewhere that, the Buddha's auric field extended 3 miles in every direction.
Wow.
So, as we do spiritual practices and really attune our fields, our aura can expand beyond, the average person who's not doing any kind of conscious development.
Right.
So, yes, it absolutely has a field. And so I do think that when we are getting our auras photographed,
Mm-hmm.
that we're looking at the etheric double.
Okay. That's what it reminded me of as I was listening to you describe it. It's not only is it your magnetic field and those things, but if you're able to see your aura, that's probably what you were looking at is your etheric body or your etheric field.
Right. And the chakras are very much associated with the etheric body. And I have confirmed a whole episode with Philip Cliff going into C.W. Ledbetter's book on chakras. So we will explore that in even more detail soon. And I'm very excited about it. I'm going to try not to get too off on a tangent, but the chakras that you know of are absolutely associated with the etheric double. Now, the astral body has its own set of chakras, but these are separate and have to be developed over time.
Right.
So, the chakras within the body are helping move that vital energy around. And some of them, pull in vital energy into them. And they all have like a certain function and a certain color that will radiate into the field, right? So we have emotions, which come from the astral body and trickle into the etheric double. So they are so intimately connected. That's why so many people blend them, I think. Mm-hmm. Because, your etheric body is going to respond to your emotions and your thoughts and your desires, and it's going to affect it, right? And over time, you have some mental thoughts like that it can affect the vital force. It can affect the etheric double, and then eventually now the physical body is affected. And it started in the mind, or it started with the emotions. Grief will absolutely, can make you physically ill.
Would that also play into the idea that if you think that you're sick, or if somebody says, be like, oh, you look bad today, and gets into your mind, mm-hmm. and you start feeling sick after that, and eventually you become sick, would
right.
that be that principle?
Right. So we have the lower mind is connected to the astral body. So there's like this thread that's mm-hmm. woven through all of these bodies, and we absolutely can manifest things with the mind.
Right.
Right. And I do think that, it's the the astral body and the lower mind is more susceptible to the thoughts of others and like, really identifying so much with something that it's like, it believes it so much that it actually creates it.
Right.
And so, yes, I absolutely think we can make ourselves sick with our mind. And there can be a lot of healing just through the mind alone as well.
Right. Or, I mean, you can do it in reverse, and it's the idea, somebody, you're in a bad accident and the doctor says, you're never going to walk again. But if you don't believe it,
right.
If you believe you're going to, and you have that mental power, then you can overcome something that they think may not be possible. Right. So it can work positive or negative.
Right. So when we think about these fields, and how our fields are connecting to other people's, there's this whole book on thought forms, and every time we share an idea with someone, we're creating this thought form. We're basically implanting our ideas and thoughts into the other person's field. And they can be like seeds. They can really get planted. And if we continue to water them and nurture them, then they can actually grow into something, right?
Right.
So it's important to be mindful of things like that. If someone says something to you and you immediately feel like, wow, that put a lot of fear in me, you can just go ahead and pull that seed right out and clear your field. This is where energetic hygiene is really important, because we don't necessarily want to take on the beliefs of others when it doesn't serve us. So we have a choice to say, thank you for your observation. However, I'm not going to hold on to that thought. I'm not going to let that stay in my field. Right. So we can do cleansing or clearing, whether through prayer, the mind alone, you can just have the intention of like, that's trash.
Right. Yeah, I'm not going to hold on to that belief.
Right. But sometimes doing some kind of ritual, like a physical act, it brings that concept down. And so we're watching, like maybe we're using smoke to clear the air and seeing the smoke and, associating it with what we want to bring forward into the physical. Like it makes that idea more of a physical thing. And so that's where ritual is so supportive of like bringing thoughts into reality. So you say, okay, that brought fear in me. I don't want to believe that. So I'm going to, cleanse my field and, whatever. There's so many ways that you can do that.
Right.
It can be totally individual when it comes to that.
It makes me think of, the phrase seeing is believing, but like if you want to get rid of something or cut a cord or do something, you write it on a piece of paper and burn it. But the physical act of watching it burn away helps you ground the idea that it's going away. It helps you believe that. It brings it more into your belief system.
Right. So I feel like the homeopathic remedies, or, when we're working with like flower essences, these can also be a really good support for helping us maintain, a healthy vital force. And it really helps build up this body, because over the course of life, whether it's through stress or trauma or, genetic issues that have been passed on through our ancestors, there can be, kinks in the field here where energy is it's not flowing properly. It's not evenly distributed. And so when we take certain remedies that are matching the symptom that our body is trying to communicate with us, right? So the body and the etheric field are absolutely working together here, and it's giving us these symptoms, these remedies. We can look into them and match them with the symptoms and really support the vital force in this way by saying, okay, body, thank you for this gift. And it really helps us look at our symptoms in a more positive light. Of our body is trying to show us where we are weak or where there's a kink in the energy field. And so we give these, this support, whether it's through Reiki or, remedies. And flower essences are absolutely amazing, especially for emotional issues. So we introduce that into the field, and then the energy starts to move again. right? And then the vitality goes where it needs to go. And then this is where the body is regenerating. It's going to be, a self-maintaining organism. As long as that vital force is flowing, you are going to be able to overcome the basic things. Now, I'm not saying you'll be able to grow your arm back.
Right.
But so there's all obvious limitations. Obviously, there's certain things that we can't necessarily overcome just by working on the etheric body, but there is a lot that we can.
Well, in that recent homeopathy documentary that we just watched, it talked about, I think it was in the dog, that it completely mended the bone.
Right, he regrew his kneecap.
So, there are examples where it touches on that stuff that people think is impossible, but with the right vital force, the body can do all sorts of amazing things.
Right. I think we can do more than we've been led to believe. And this is where the mind comes in. Because if you have this limited belief about how deeply you can heal, then that's going to affect you.
Right.
So I love homeopathy because just watching these stories about, people overcoming, incurable things, I'm like, this is incredible.
Yeah.
Like they told me this was incurable. And, I had this experience myself with a couple things that were incurable that I no longer have.
Yeah.
And I had a belief around it that I was going to have it forever. And so, homeopathy was so great because it's like, now there's at least hope.
Right.
Maybe it's not going to go away fully, but the fact that there's hope at all, opens us up just right there to their potential of healing. And that's so important to have some kind of glimmer of hope there.
Yeah. There's so many people are, told that they're just going to be stuck with this problem for life, or they'll be on this pill or that pill, and that's not the case. There are ways that we can heal more fully.
Right, on deeper levels.
And that's dealing with our different bodies.
Absolutely. Right, absolutely. So with homeopathy, it's a holistic approach to health, mind, body, spirit. Well, what are we talking about today, right? It's the whole human constitution. So when you're working with a homeopath, you have acute remedies that work on, I got the sniffles, got the flu, throwing up, whatever. Those are acute things. But then we have constitutional remedies, which deal with the whole being, right? The being's emotional life, their genetic lineage, the traumas that they have endured, the suffering. It looks at all of the symptoms and looks at the whole person. So I truly believe that when we're working on that constitutional level, that we are like all the way up to source, right? And when we clear some of these bogs, that life force is just able to flow freely. And I think we can just heal in ways that are unimaginable at that point.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree.
And it was through this book, The Etheric Double, that I really decided I want to explore homeopathy more, because I was having these like miraculous healings that I had been told couldn't happen. And then I remembered this book and I was like, oh, wow. This is the vital force. The etheric body is, absolutely linked in with it. And so, I don't know, it just made complete sense to me at that point how it's working, and became less like, oh, it's pseudoscience or whatever. Right. And I was like, oh, this makes sense. There's actually a science to this. Right. It might be a spiritual science, but it's still proven over, years and years and years of these different case studies.
Hopefully, as we move into the future, there'll be a lot more connecting physical science with spirit science, and understanding the many deeper levels that we're actually existing on, and how you can work with them all.
Right. And our ancestors knew that.
Right.
We're just rediscovering what they already knew. So I've read some things that say that homeopathy goes all the way back to like ancient Lemuria, and like they use those principles to heal themselves. Yeah. And, we have these beings that live like these incredibly long lives. And how are they doing that? What's their vital force is just flowing and active, and like they're not aging and deteriorating in the same way that we are, and they're probably experiencing less traumas and things like that. And so they were able to live really long lifespans. So I feel like, maybe eventually humanity will evolve back into some of those things. And I think homeopathy is definitely the medicine of the future. And it does bridge science and spirituality together because it is holistic, holy, right? It has holy in the word. So it gives room for source and spirit to also play its role in our healing.
Right.
Yeah. So anyways, that's just my thing that I love right now. So I had to share that with everybody because it's totally relevant.
Right. It totally connects. And it helps explain what's going on, I think, with homeopathy, which is important.
Right. Absolutely. All right. So let's move on to the astral body, which is where this episode started, because as I was wanting to map out the astral plane, I'm like, well, we got to talk about the astral body.
Right.
We have to talk about the vehicle that we are in when we're in the astral plane. So it's kind of silly to map it out and not talk about the part of us that enters that realm.
Right.
Or that field. So the astral body is referred to as the linga sarira. And when we are talking about this, so we can be mindful that linga denotes shape or form and sarira means body. So it's just, it's a body, right? It's a vehicle. I want to go into the principle of interpenetration as we're talking about the astral body. This principle makes it clear that the different realms of nature are not separated in space, but exist about us here and now, so that to perceive and investigate them, no movement in space is necessary, but only an opening within ourselves of the senses by means of which they can be perceived. So the astral body and the astral realm is not separate from us. It's all right here.
Yeah.
Right. And everything that exists in the physical world, every item, every person, it all has an astral counterpart.
It's very much like the upside down in Stranger Things.
Right. Because it's a mirror world in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And because it's interpenetrating, you can actually be taking up the same space as, an astral form. And you can exist in the same exact space, which our physical bodies can't. Two people can't exist at the same point. Mm-hmm. You have to scoot over. But it's not like that in the astral plane. And I was reading some Steiner on it, which he has an incredible amount of information on the astral plane, there was thousands of things that came up when I typed in the Rudolf Steiner archives on the astral plane. I think it was over 1,000 quotes or documents came up. So lots to explore there. But in the astral plane, it's not unfamiliar to just see clumps of beings all existing in one space kind of together.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and it's very fascinating because, as I'm in my Akashic records, there's definitely lifetimes where they'll be you were merged with this other person. And I'm like, how could that be? And I think it might be that in that lifetime we existed more, we had an astral body, but maybe not a physical body. Mm-hmm. And so, 3 people could all be succinct.
Right.
And then as they incarnate into physical bodies, now they're 3 separate beings. But there's points where it's I'll see people and they're one person, but they're separate. And I think that that's what it is maybe it's in the astral plane. So the astral body is the model body on which the physical is formed. It's made up of astral matter or substance in what science calls ether. So you can see how this might get confusing with the etheric double because, a lot of it is overlapping. Mm-hmm. And that's okay because they're interconnected. So it works. It's sometimes called a casa in theosophy. Not everyone has developed the astral faculties to enable them to see the astral light. But everybody has an astral body, right? And everyone is, going into the astral plane when they're sleeping. Your average person that's not conscious or wanting to develop or study further may just have, some slight memories of dreams from time to time. It doesn't mean anything to them. But the adept, who's, conscious in the astral plane, can make a lot of progress here, and help other beings and grow and evolve and learn a lot. And so, if we really want to develop this relationship with our astral body, we can really strengthen it and actively use this vehicle to get us around the astral plane.
And I guess it would also connect in with astral projecting.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what you're projecting, is the astral body.
Yeah.
So the astral body slowly passes away after death, which I kind of touched on earlier. The etheric double and the body, they're going to be taken first. And then the astral body can linger for quite a while in the astral plane. Most people are going to cross over and move on quicker. And we'll get into this a little bit more when we talk about the astral plane, but it's also called Kamaloka. And sometimes the astral body is referred to as the Kama Rupa. So Kama means desire, and Rupa, it means form. And so a human being who has a lot of cravings and like earthly desires may hang around in this lower astral realm longer than someone who had a really deep spiritual life that, worked on its, addictions and cravings while it was in the body. Mm-hmm. It's going to be like less desirable for it to hang around here. But yeah, the desires we have in the physical body can carry over. And there's a lot of times when you enter this astral realm, because it mirrors our own, like some people I don't think realize that they're dead, and they don't realize that they're still like going to work, right? It's like the Sixth Sense, and they're like, what kind of lame guy is this? He was still going to work and he was dead. And like, it's just like they're in this routine.
Right.
And then they cross over and it's like they're still playing this story on repeat.
Yeah. So
this is important because this helps us to be more aware of, these addictions or these like physical things that hold us to the earth. I also think that this might be why, in Hinduism, cremation is like the thing.
Interesting.
Because I think the astral body, it still wants to be connected to its physical vessel. And so if we haven't eliminated that, it might linger around, right, for a while. And I think when you have people that are psychics, or they're seeing ghosts, or they're having these conversations, what they're having conversations with is the astral shell that is still existing from that human being that has crossed over. And it still has the information. Mm-hmm. And I think it still, to a certain extent, has a little bit of vitality. It hasn't fully diminished.
Right. Still moving around and doing things.
So you can ask the astral shell a question and it might still have some of the memories because it's still connected to the higher manas, right? Mm-hmm. It might still hold some of the memories that it could share with somebody.
That makes me think, and I don't remember what book it was. I think it might have been a Steiner book, but it was talking about how it's important to acknowledge the person once they've died and give them permission to pass on, mm-hmm. because they may not realize what's happened, or they may still feel stuck here. And so by you saying that and acknowledging it, it helps them, I guess it helps them connect the dots and understand that what's happened, that they need to move along.
Right, to cross over.
Yeah.
Out of Kamaloka into Devachan or Devakan, which will be like the higher, more blissful fields that we go into before reincarnation. Mm-hmm. So the astral body, it connects us to like this psychic phenomena. It extends to the astral plane. It's associated with dreams, emotions. It is responsible for all psychic abilities. It facilitates the interactions between consciousness and subtle energies and dimensions. The astral aura, so we talked about the etheric aura. The astral aura extends around like a cloud. The size increases with each initiation. So, these are initiations are these spiritual, like upgrades basically, that we can take on our journey through life. And once we take these initiations, they are stored into the higher manas. And so this is where you'll have an example of like Yogananda was born, and when he was a baby, he like randomly was like speaking Sanskrit and then went back into baby mode. But like he still remembered. Some of these great adepts will still remember their past lives.
Right.
And it's because they've taken certain initiations. And this is where self-analysis and study, they say, you know, love is the only thing that goes on, but it actually goes beyond that, because some of the spiritual knowledge that we're acquiring, like when we integrate it, we can carry that also forward into our future timelines as well.
It makes it more important to do the work if you can scale back and understand that the work you're doing is for future lifetimes as well. Because sometimes, at least for me, it can be frustrating if I'm looking at all the stuff that you have to change from doing or giving up, and the stuff that's bad for you, you know, bad foods or stuff. And you look around and other people are doing them, but I think to myself, you know, not only is this helping me in this lifetime, but by making certain changes or doing some of these initiations and doing some of the deep work, you're actually setting yourself up for future lifetimes as well. And if you can scale out that way, it makes it a lot more worth doing the hard work. Because, I mean, you've got to do it at some point. And so you do the hard work now, and you start, because you can look at it as you're going to start a level up in your next life.
Right, because you're more conscious of the patterns. You know, as you start to study yourself from that spiritual perspective, you're more in alignment with your soul. And there's less like of those hard lessons. So I think about like when I'm in the records, they give certain prayers, and these prayers can eliminate karmic bonds. I also think about the miasms, you know, which is a big thing in homeopathy, which are like these energetic imprints. And I do believe that some of these actually carry over from past lives, and this can be associated with the causal body. But I also think that like as we become conscious individuals and we can see those dots, that we can release some of those patterns in a gentler way.
Yeah.
But if we're acting unconsciously and we're not taking time to be self-aware, we're not going to make those connections. And I feel like that leads to, you know, a lot more suffering, and it takes a lot longer and more lifetimes. So that's where like the spiritual work kind of pays off in a lot of ways, and helps us reduce our suffering.
Yeah.
And be more mindful of like not creating these karmic bonds with people, and being more kind, and not wanting to have to pay all these debts off.
Right.
In our future incarnations.
Right. If you can work on, you know, your addictions and things now, you're not going to carry them forward and be stuck with them in future lifetimes or in the worlds between now and then. And
Right.
it's totally worth the effort, even if it gets overwhelming at times.
All right. So the three main functions of the astral body are to make sensation possible, to serve as a bridge between mind and physical matter, and to act as an independent vehicle of consciousness and action. So I'm going to now read a quote, and I'm pretty sure that this came from A.E. Powell's Astral Body book. Briefly, the astral body of man is a vehicle to clairvoyant sight, not unlike the physical body. Surrounded by an aura of flashing colors, composed of matter of an order of fineness higher than that of the physical matter, in which feelings, passions, desires, and emotions are expressed, and which acts as a bridge or medium of transmission between the physical brain and the mind, the latter opening in the still higher vehicle, the mind-body. While every man possesses and uses an astral body, comparatively few are conscious of its existence or can control and function it in full consciousness. So I highlighted the words feelings, passions, desires, and emotions. So all of these words correspond to the word kama, right? That's where the kama rupa comes in. And when we think of kama loka, these desires, Now, karma is neutral in its essence because it really has to do with what the soul or the mind, how is the soul and the mind using those desires to move and create action and response in the physical body. When we combine the kama with manas, which is mind, this is actually where we get the personality, right? So it's important. All of it's important. Even the personality plays a role. So, understanding where your personality comes from and, making little adaptations as you go of like, okay, well, this isn't as desirable, right? Your desires are going to change
Right.
as you evolve on the spiritual path.
That's true.
So it's important to make sure that your desires are aligning with what you're trying to manifest and what you want to bring into the world, right? So, desire is not necessarily a negative thing, which is what I wanted to talk about. Because a lot of times we do associate it with like the animalistic side of ourselves, right?
Right.
And sometimes the Kama Rupa is associated with like the animal form. So yeah, you can get stuck there, right? People are like totally addicted to sex or addicted to food, or that's, you're giving your desires like way too much of your energy at that point.
Right.
So you want to kind of keep them in check. So, feelings, passions, desires, emotions. This makes me think so much of, when Steiner's constantly going back in some of his esoteric literature of thinking, feeling, and willing. And like this means everything, right? This is how we become more mindful of what our actions are doing. So like really when we're thinking, like being aware of our thoughts, and aligning our will with our desire, right? And our feelings, like evaluating our feelings, like what are we feeling? Because those feelings, they're associated with the astral body, but they're trickling into the physical body.
Right.
Right. So if we have like crazy, like bursts of anger, like that's going to create a certain vibration, right? And it's going to trickle into the physical. And so this is where like each of these bodies has an aura, and, we have a color that corresponds with all of these different emotions, and then it starts affecting the field and then eventually trickles in, right, into the physical body. All right, so I feel like we've done a pretty good job talking about the astral body. Let's go on, unless you have anything to add.
So is the astral body and the astral plane, is that what we would consider to be fourth dimension?
Yes, I'm going to say yes. It is, if we're in like third density, mm-hmm. and we think about the astral body being fourth density, they really are stacked right on top of each other. Mm-hmm. And it also bridges us into those higher densities, dimensions. So when we were doing the deep dive into Barbara Handcloud's Alchemy of 9 Dimensions, she absolutely considers the fourth dimension the astral plane.
That's what I was thinking.
And many people can access the astral light or the Akash through this plane. Or you can go into the first dimension, the core of the earth, and get information there. But there is information in the astral plane that you can acquire, whether it's exploring like the history of earth or your past lives or things like that. But without moving through the fourth dimension, you can't go to the higher spheres. Mm-hmm. You have to open up this particular part of yourself in order to go into the higher dimensions of like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So really working on developing that astral body is important, focusing on your desires and your will, and like actively trying to be a conscious individual,
right.
Wanting to connect to your higher self, right? And it's going to be that will, like you can literally will that, and then be, merging with the higher parts of yourself and bringing that wisdom down. And so then you can be even more like tuned into what the soul wants, because you're not going to have this severance. But you have to have a pretty strong, connection to your astral body to open up that field.
Right.
Right. To make connection to the other vehicles or dimensions possible
Right.
in a conscious way, because we are interacting with other dimensions all the time. We're just very unconscious about it.
Right, and that's where you get stuck in the lower fourth density with the lower astral beings and
Yeah.
the fear and the addictions and the negative desires, like you were saying.
Right, which we'll totally get into when we explore the scenery of the astral plane, the different levels.
Right, that'll be exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. So let's move on to the lower mental body, which is associated with karma still. So talking about the koshas again, this is associated with the monomaya kosha, the sheath of intellect and desire. So we have the lower and the higher mental plane. The lower mental plane is associated with worldly thoughts and intelligence, where the higher plane is going to be more of that divine intuition and wisdom and things like that. So we talked about kama and manas together form the personality. So this is an important part of our, becoming an individual, right? This is where the ego is going to play in, right? So this is where the mental planes come in. So kama is the driving and impelling force in the human constitution. Like I said earlier, it's neither good or bad, and is only as such as the mind or soul is directing it. Kama is the seat of electrical impulses and aspirations. Every particle in the physical brain has its astral counterpart, and this in turn has its mental counterpart. So you see how they're all penetrating again? You can't talk about one without talking about the other, because they're absolutely firing, like when this one fires, it's, trickling down and connecting to these other fields. All right, so I'm going to now read a quote from A.E. Powell's book, The Mental Body, where he kind of goes into it a little bit more. The mental body is thus the vehicle of the ego, of the real thinker, who himself resides in the causal body. But while the mental body is intended eventually to be the vehicle of consciousness on the lower mental plane, it also works on and through the astral and physical bodies in all manifestations that are usually called the mind in ordinary waking consciousness. In detail, the process is as follows. The act of concrete thinking sets in vibration the matter of the mental body. This vibration is transferred an octave lower, as it were, to the grosser matter of the thinker's astral body. From that, in turn, the etheric particles of the brain are affected. And through them, finally, the denser gray matter of the dense body is brought into action. Thus, before a thought can be translated into active consciousness on the physical brain, all of these successive steps must be taken. The sympathetic nervous system is mostly connected with the astral body, while the cerebral spinal system is more under the influence of the ego working through the mental body.
That's interesting.
Right, so our mental body is absolutely affecting the physical and the astral bodies. I also have this quote from Blavatsky, and she says, once imprisoned or incarnate, there the manas, essence, becomes dual. That is to say, the rays of the eternal divine mind, considered as individual entities, assume a twofold attribute, which is A, their essential inherent characteristic, heaven-aspiring mind, the higher manas, and B, the lower human quality of thinking, of animal cognition, rationalized owing to the superiority of the human brain, the kama tending or lower manas. So the lower manas is engulfed in the quaternary, the lower four that we talked about at the beginning, and may be regarded as clasping kama with one hand, whilst with the other it retains its hold on its father, the higher manas. So that's what's separating the lower and the higher, is the mind, right? We have that lower mind, and it's a part of the personality, and it's different in every lifetime, but it's connected to the higher mind, which is going to hold the memories of our cosmic lineage, right? Our cosmic memory. Whether it be dragged down by kama altogether and be torn away from the triad, the Atma, Buddhi, Manas, to which by its nature it belongs, or whether it will triumphantly carry back to its source a purified experience of its earth life, that is the life problem set and solved in each successive incarnation. So that's what I got on the lower. So let's talk about the higher mind, the higher manas. It is sometimes called the Karana Sarira. So we got Sarira coming back up again. And now we're getting into the higher triad. And the higher triad is the immortal aspect of us. And so this is the part of us that, we can reconnect with and have, that memory that the higher self is carrying.
So it's there no matter when we die in any of our lifetimes, it's still there.
Right. It holds the memory. And so I think that this is where karma is coming into our experience, because it's like from that higher level, like we want to work these kinks out.
Right.
And when we get here, we're like, what the heck? Why would I do this? It's because on the soul level, like we want to be, operating in this harmonious way. Mm-hmm. And we want to get those desires and emotions and all that under control, because it helps us on the spiritual planes. So it helps us develop those higher faculties.
And I guess it makes sense thinking about it in that way of why we would need to forget, because if you just remembered, your karmic bonds and things like that, it'd be real easy to just move through them. But if you want to really grow in your actual nature, you would have to almost start fresh each time so that you can prove that you've learned these lessons, so to speak.
Right. And if you haven't taken the initiations, you're not going to remember.
Right.
Because that takes a very active, that's like a choice that you're making. Like, I want to remember. I want to live my life in a certain way where I can bring this forward because it's that valuable.
Right.
Right. And I want to be able to make these connections. It
matters to me. I'm trying to grow out of it. I'm actively trying to expand.
Right. So the higher mental vehicle is associated with the causal body. And this is the Vijnanamaya kosha, which is associated with the discriminating sheath. So the higher manas. The higher mental vehicle is the highest innermost body that veils the Atman, our true self. So the Atman has to hide itself in these different veils in order to even have a human experience, because it's so like beyond all of that. And that's why it sort of veils itself in these different bodies. So once again, with the mental, it's the IMI. So that's kind of associated with the higher and lower mental. It's considered the highest subtle body beyond the mental body. And the causal body is associated with the causal plane. So I have a quote here. This is from A. Powell's Astral Body. Free will resides in manas. Manas being the representative of Mahat, the universal mind. In physical man, the lower manas is the agent of free will. From manas comes the feeling of liberty, the knowledge that we can rule ourselves, and the higher nature can master the lower. To identify the consciousness with the manas instead of with kama is thus an important step on the road of self-mastery. The very struggle of manas to assert itself is the best testimony that it is by nature free. It is the presence and power of the ego which enables a man to choose between desires and to overcome them. As the lower manas rules kama, the lower quaternary takes its rightful position of subservience to the higher triad, which is the Atma Buddhi manas. So that all of that the lower four things that we've talked about are now of service to the higher principles. Right?
Okay.
So it's important to develop those things and work through those things, because it is through that those lower four, that the soul and spirit can come down into dense form.
That's interesting.
And affect, the third dimension. So the causal body is sometimes like the visual image that goes with it is a lotus. And each of the petals of the lotus are types of wisdom. And you'll hear sometimes that there's like the jewel in the lotus, and that's like the monad, right? The monad, right? The monad is veiling itself. It's sort of hidden. And as we unfold this lotus and like each petal starts to open, we get like a little bit closer to that divine aspect of ourselves. So there's 3 permanent atoms associated with the causal body. So the mental permanent atom, the emotional permanent atom, and the etheric permanent atom. And each of these is associated with like how we are attracting certain substance, because we'll attract certain things to these permanent atoms. And this is how we create our bodies, how our karma is transmuted, because each of these permanent atoms is holding the energy of all the previous mental experiences, all the emotions, all the etheric. And it'll actually draw things to itself. For instance, like the proper parents, right? That will have the framework needed for the soul to continue on.
Okay.
Exactly where it is. So it's these permanent atoms that are kind of like the blueprint and help us when we're like moving on to the next incarnation. And so there's this concept of the Sutratma, and this is the life thread that descends into the physical body. And through this thread, that's the thread that's sort of bringing these atoms down. And then out of that, we're bringing that into like the physicality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It reminds me, I was just watching a podcast the other night, Robert Edward Grant, and he was interviewing Daryl Anka, who channels Bashar, and he was asking him, a bunch of different questions, and Daryl was explaining different ideas that Bashar had taught him through the channeling, and one of them was about the concept of the soul. And he said the way that Bashar describes the soul is you can visualize it kind of like a sphere or an egg, and at the very center of that, just as you were saying with the different atoms, the soul focuses in its intention, and in the center draws these little pieces together until the physical is formed at the very center. And that's where you have your physical existence here on the physical plane. And when that's done, those little pieces expand back out into the larger sphere until it's ready to refocus on another physical existence. And then it draws them back together and focuses in and does, another lifetime. Mm-hmm. But it all takes place inside this sphere, inside this egg. Mm-hmm. And that it makes perfect sense with what you just said, because there would be a thread that travels from the whole all the way down into the center of this, where things are being attracted and focused on intention at the different levels. So it's very fascinating. That caught my attention the other night. That makes perfect sense.
Right. And if you look at our original picture, which is the framework of our episode, which I guess I should post. I might post it on Instagram so you guys can come back and look at it. I mean, what does that look like?
Looks like an egg.
Yeah, it's like an egg within an egg within an egg within an egg. It's like it's layers.
Yeah.
Oh, we forgot to do the Shrek thing.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's just like some people would say an onion, but I don't know why you'd ever say it's an onion. You should really just say it's more like a parfait. Everybody loves parfait. You never meet anybody say, hey, you want a parfait? Say, hell no, I don't want no parfait. Everybody loves parfait. So whatever you want to think about it as, onion, parfait, whatever. But it makes sense. And I think a lot of people, at least in my mind in the past, when somebody talks about a soul, I think you could probably picture it more as like a spirit that comes in and out of your body, and that's just not true. It's so much bigger than you, and we're taking place right now. Our existence is this tiny little piece inside this massive soul.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not some little thing that leaves our body when we pass away. We are this little thing inside of it, and we go back into the grand part of it until it's ready to focus in and recreate us in another life, in another space at some point.
Right. Absolutely.
So that helped me a lot to visualize it that way.
Right. And that expansion, is something we're going to get to when we talk about the buddhic body and the atmic body. I'll say that the higher self at this stage is now bridging the causal body to the buddhic body, right? And when we talk about these next two bodies, they are inseparable. Like they are totally merged together. We only separate them to try to understand them more deeply. But at the end of the day, they're like absolutely interconnected. So the buddhic body, or the buddhi, is also considered the Ananda Maya Kosha, the bliss sheath, if you're looking at it from the Kosha lens. Buddhi means to awaken. It's associated with the spiritual soul. Some of the faculties that are associated with it is intuition, love, wisdom, pure reason, and harmony. So these are the higher. This is not intellect anymore, right? Mm-hmm. This is the higher forms of wisdom that you can't get by reading a bunch of books, right? This is like true, like, remembrance of all that is. Buddhi is the next frontier that man has to develop within his intelligence. So, that's kind of where we're headed, right? Is more into a more of an intuitive wisdom versus just this book learning, this, just science without any spirit involved.
That's what we would consider enlightenment, right?
Right. Well, you think about Buddha, right? There's a reason why the Buddha is called what he is. So Buddhi is the garment. Once again, it's veiling the primary substance. It can manifest as understanding, judgment, discrimination. It steps down the energies of the Atman to the manas, or the ego. Buddhi is the principle of universal good. It acts in harmony with spiritual order. It is a principle of spiritual consciousness of the highest kind and is associated with our soul intelligence. So I'm going to read this quote from Leah Line Wright. And she says, Buddhi steps down the energies of Atman to Manas, the ego. From the standpoint of the ego, Buddhi is practically a universal principle. It is therefore the seat or organ of impersonal love, that love of all creatures, which is divine. And in the same sense, Buddhi is the origin of human conscience, our sense of rectitude and duty. Conscience is rooted in our feeling of duty towards others. It is also a sense of what is right. The right thing is the universal thing, that which everyone ought to do when acting in harmony with spiritual law and order. The ego is willful. It seeks itself and its own way. Buddhi moves up to the sacrifice of the egotistical feelings and actions to the principle of universal good. So this is like, the Christ consciousness, what was the Buddha? These beings were absolutely acting from these higher planes and bringing them into density for us to show us examples. They are avatars of these higher energies. So as important as the ego is, and it's absolutely a part of us, there is this possibility of, bending the ego to where we're kind of working with it to be able to facilitate these higher spiritual principles, to bring in unity and harmony, and to act in a way that I'm not going to do something that's going to cause harm to another.
Right.
And it's like our will becomes so interconnected to the universal will in these higher stages that it's, this can be kind of martyring in a lot of ways, like taking away our selfish desires and instead saying, I desire for all of my brothers and sisters to be united, to be in a place of peace, to be healthy, to be loved. And it's sort of, from this higher sphere saying, I can't even go on unless all of humanity is going too. So it's sort of like this part of us that is connected to that universal aspect of us all.
Right.
So yeah, it's associated with the love wisdom, which is one of the 7 rays. 7 coming up again. And we could do a whole deep dive into the 7 rays because I love that, but we're not going to do it today. But it's absolutely connected with the ray of love wisdom. So now we'll go ahead and talk about the atmic body, which cannot be separated from the buddhic body. So the atmic body is connected to the divine monad and is considered the heart of the monad. I'm going to read this quote from Leoline again in reference to the monad. In every particle of matter, there is imprisoned a spark of the universal, indestructible life. This spark is named in Theosophy the monad, a word which means a unit, an individual. This monad is a point, a center of complete individualized, indestructible consciousness, originating, as said, in the central universal life. Such a monad lives at the core of every organism, from an atom to a star. So when we think about the Atman, we're thinking about the sense of I am. And this is a universal, statement of like just being alive. Every living being is going to have this experience of I am. Even down to the animals. The animals might not be I am I, right? They might not have a full ego development like that.
Right.
But any being that's alive is going to have that sense of I am. And that is, connecting them to the Atman. The I am is universal and the same in all creatures. The Atman is too far above the human plane to work directly here. So it clothes itself in booty and then it goes through all of these levels, right, to get finally down all the way to the physical form. Atma means pure spirit and is Sanskrit for self. This is interesting, as I was looking into this because I did Kundalini yoga for a long time. And, the greeting that we would always do is Satnam. And then we would do many mantras like Satanam and just repeating this statement of true self and reminding each other of our true self. I mean, it's just over and over again. Like you greet Satnam, Satnam, like, and it's kind of this beautiful way of like continuing to bring that true self into your awareness so that you do not forget and that you're very aware that this is kind of like an illusion, right? Of Maya.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you aren't any of these things. You're so much more than your personality. You're so much more than those lower manas. You're more than your thoughts. You're more than, your suffering. You're more than these experiences that you've had here.
Yeah.
And in the other lifetimes. At the end of the day, you are, a part of the divine spark. Like you're a part of source. And when you're reminded of that true self, it's so healing because it kind of like helps that other stuff fade just enough to where you're like, you can remember the goal or you can remember that, this is who I truly am. Like I am a divine being,
It seems like that's a reason that people would go off to a monastery or a temple somewhere and spend a lot of their time meditating and focusing on that, because I think you probably get closer to that state the more you keep yourself in reminding of that, and the more that you just interact in the day to day and you have to get caught up in the bustle of life, the less you remember that, your true self. But if you're able to just sit and meditate for a while, then I think you're able to come closer to that more frequently and just kind of live and exist in that space.
Mm-hmm. Right. And these practices, they help us direct our consciousness and get into these states, and it becomes easier and easier to access them because we're actually now starting to develop some of these energy centers that are, because like I said, there's 7 within all the 7. So we have energy centers within all 7 of these bodies, and some of them are underdeveloped. As we do these spiritual practices, we are able to go in and out of these states of consciousness a lot easier. We're able to be more productive in those states, to actually learn from maybe some of these masters, to get wisdom, straight from the Akasha itself. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful, and it's something we can cultivate over time with our intention. If that's what we're willing, and we're directing our thoughts and our intentions to do that, we can absolutely connect into these higher planes and remember our true self, and, work with that universal love and like life source energy, which is coming from the atmic body, and it's absolutely where some of our highest powers are, and that we can bring forward. But we have to have, like, it can't be like bullshit here, like it has to, the mind and all that has to be in alignment, in order to access these higher spheres. And so, it's all of that mental work, all of that shadow work, all this like physical like labor of getting the body and into a healthy place. All of it is important, right?
Yeah.
And this is where practices like yoga are so helpful, because when we're doing yoga, we're really kind of touching all of these bodies at once in that practice. There's a mental aspect. There's different forms of yoga.
Right.
We have like devotion, and then we have like more of the physical, and we have the mental, the yana or whatever. But it's kind of all of these things that come together that really make us feel like a whole being, right? We're connected to all of the parts of ourselves. We're bringing that wisdom to the forefront. We're living from a place where the soul is now leading, where we're in remembrance of our connection to source. And, we're very aware of that. And we're not going to do anything at that stage to sever those connections, because that we've worked so hard for.
Right.
And, as we're developing this connection, there's initiations involved, and we absolutely get to take some of those forward into our other timelines. And so it's important for your future self to do this work.
Well, that's like, your yoga teacher that you began with, Donham, said that, you're not going to find that particular type of yoga in this lifetime unless you've done it before.
Yeah. Right. Which we discovered in my records that I had. So, that's cool. It's just, not everyone's ready for some of the really deep spiritual things. Everyone has their own path, and everyone's at different points. And we don't really have to be super concerned where other people are at. We just want to be open enough to say, to maybe share experiences when they're relevant, or if that person needs a little assistance or is asking for assistance, to maybe help provide that.
Right.
And that's where that universal love comes in, of like, I'll absolutely hold this space for you. I'll absolutely help you reach, some of the higher states. Or just help you transmute some of these lower, density things, like just getting over a sickness, or, that's where it's like the universal brother or sisterhood. And that's absolutely associated with the Atman, right?
Right.
One of the mantras that I would say in my Kundalini yoga class at the end would be life to all, peace to all, love to all. These are very much, atmic, like booty kind of mantras, right? We're bringing that forward. We're praying for humanity. We're now at that state where we're ready to do the work that it takes to help everybody get home, right? And if that's just doing the mantras and holding the prayers and intentions, then that's still something, right? We're definitely not holding anyone back,
Right.
because we're all one. When we're being mindful of our thoughts and our actions, we create that space in the collective consciousness. And, if one person does it, then it like creates this example for all the others. That's why the avatars are so important, because they show us the potential that we could evolve into. So it's really important to have that, because that gives us hope, right? That gives us some kind of like, okay, that could be the goal, right?
Right.
And so when one of us like ascends, it helps all of us, right? Because we are all one, right? And this is where, like the monad comes in, right? Or the all. And I was going to end reading this esoteric interpretation of this quote on the logos, which it's similar, I think, to some of the Christian stuff, but it's been kind of distorted. So this is like their version of this quote. So, in the beginning of this universe was the Logos, and the Logos was with the Absolute, and the Logos was the direct radiation from the Absolute. The same was in the beginning with the Absolute. All things in this universe have been emanated and evolved from the Logos, and nothing has existed here except through the Logos. In the Logos was divine life itself, and that life is the spiritual light in man. The light of the Logos shone forth from the darkness of the Absolute, and the Absolute remained entirely unaffected and unmoved thereby, being absoluteness itself. So when I think about, we all have this life spark in us, and we, this is such a gift, right? This is what connects us to everyone else. Like everyone is a part of this Logos. We're all a part of Source, and we're all in it together.
Yeah.
And so it's important to show love to all of the creatures and beings around you, and to try to really operate from those higher planes of like love and peace and harmony. And it really does make an impact, even if it seems small. One person going out into the world and being just a kind, generous human being can change so many people's days. And like, then those people go and change things. And it's just like this beautiful ripple effect.
Oh, yeah.
And we have that kind of power to make a huge impact with our small, day-to-day, mundane life. Like, that is where the spirituality is. It's in those mundane encounters that you don't think are sacred. Those are the most sacred.
Yeah.
And all of these, it's all veiled, every person you meet is just God in that's veiled, right? So every time you help that person, you're helping, you're helping God, you're helping yourself, right? Because we're all just walking each other home. We're all in this together. So when one person succeeds, we all succeed.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is about all I have for this particular part. So thank you so much for doing this episode with me.
Yeah, absolutely. I love coming on here and being on the podcast with you. Are there any ways that people can help you out and help the podcast out any?
Sure. Yes, you can help support me. I do readings, and that helps a lot. So you can book reading. I do Akashic record readings, tarot and oracle readings, and astrology readings. And you can book at AstralMeadow.com. Looking in and working with like the Akashic records or looking at your natal chart, this is really going to help. And it's helped me a lot connect to like, what is the soul seeking in this lifetime? What are some ways I can enliven, those parts of myself that want to come forward and things like that. We can do a lot of really deep work in these readings. And it does help me too, right? When I'm financially abundant, I can do more research and make more podcasts and share more of this kind of information with the collective. So it's kind of like the symbiotic relationship of me helping my community and also them supporting me. So yeah, that's probably the best way to support me. If you wanted to sponsor or donate to the podcast, you could reach out through my website or through my email, theastralhour@yahoo.com to set something up.
Awesome. And you can always go and get an Astral Hour t-shirt
Yes.
or a mug or a notebook or whatever it is that you may want. But that's great. I think it's an amazing podcast. You've had some amazing guests, and I really think we're just picking up steam And so anybody's support will definitely help make some even more incredible content.
Right. And just the whole superficial like and subscribe.
That's true. Yeah.
That helps too, because, some people don't even give it a chance based on the fact that it only has like this many subscribers on YouTube. So YouTube has been hard for me to take off on, because I started like way late into podcasting to put it on there. So yeah, like and subscribing on YouTube, following me on Instagram, giving me a 5-star rating on whatever platform you're listening on. All of those little things help.
And share with a friend that you think has an open mind or would be interested in it. There's all sorts of different episodes that you could connect with people that I think that they would find really, really fascinating. So share it around too.
Yes, definitely when it's resonating. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Can't wait to do the second part on the astral plane.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited about that one. And thank you all for tuning in. Check us out next time on the Astral Hour.